Hi friends, welcome to the Bible Project Daily Podcast. And I'm returning after a 13-day break. Now you may not have noticed it because I got myself in advance on the recordings of these episodes, but I've actually been off recording and studying and doing these daily podcasts for nearly 2 weeks due to having had some surgery. But we're back again and hopefully enjoying continuing together working through the Bible Project Daily Podcast, where we're going on this magnificent journey, Lord willing, through the whole Bible eventually, chapter by chapter, verse by verse. Now, just before kicking off on studying part 200 of Genesis, where we're looking at chapter 26 and the faithfulness of God compared to our fickleness, I would just like to point out at this stage that there are some plans for some new content to be available on another platform called Patreon. But so keep listening to the introductions over the next few days, and I'll hopefully be able to update you with how I plan to progress that side of the work. The main core of what I'm doing, which will always be free and always available, will be the daily podcast, the 6 to 8 minute episodic journey through the whole Bible, chapter by chapter, verse by verse. So today we're picking up again just where we left off in Genesis chapter 26, and we're just going to pick up the text now from verse 4, which says this, and this is God speaking to Isaac: I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and give them all these lands, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed. Now notice this time what he says to Isaac. He's saying exactly the same thing that he earlier, a few chapters back, said to Abraham. In other words, he's saying he's going to give him lots of descendants, and he talks about giving this particular land to those descendants, which we talked about in the last episode. However, he adds something to this verse in that this is what I want you to see, is that through these descendants, he says, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Now that's an add-on. So what's he talking about? Now, many Bible teachers, including the Jewish rabbis, have concluded assuredly that this is a reference to the Messiah, the coming Messiah, telling him that the Messiah is going to come through this line of Abraham, Isaac, and later Isaac's son Jacob. And this is him simply reiterating, as he promised Abraham, that the Messiah is going to come through the Jewish family line. So the text continues again with the Lord speaking in verse 5, where it says this, and this is God speaking: because Abraham obeyed me and did everything I required of him, keeping my command, my decrees, and my instructions, it then tells us, so Isaac stayed in Gerar. Now notice how the Lord is just piling one phrase upon another, emphasizing the obedience, how obedience to his word is important. The language used in verse 5 is the kind of language that Moses will later use to describe the Mosaic law. Your father obeyed me, he says to Isaac. Hint, hint, get the message, Isaac, you should do the same. So what did Isaac do? God appeared to him and said, don't go down to Egypt, stay where you are. Well, the short and sweet, the truth of it is, he didn't do what the Lord told him to do. Now granted, he didn't go down to Egypt, but he didn't stay in the land either. As a matter of fact, his father Abraham did exactly the same thing in the same circumstances a half a generation earlier. So neither of them totally obeyed the Lord. Now the first part of this passage is simply telling us the events, the circumstances of this famine, and also showing Isaac's initial reaction to it. But before I go into the second part of the passage, I'd just like to say that this was clearly a great trial. This was clearly a very difficult time for Isaac, no less because there was a famine in the land, and he probably found himself sitting in a situation where he literally didn't know what he should do. So it helps us, I believe, if we ask the question, what should we do if we're facing difficult times in our own lives? Well, one of the answers I believe this text gives us is that we should listen to the Lord and quite simply do what he says. Abraham didn't do that, not completely anyway, and now Isaac as well doesn't do it. Instead, he goes to Gerar. Now let's look what happens next in the next verse, verse 7. When the men of that place asked him about his wife, he said, "She is my sister," because he is afraid to say, "She is my wife." He thought these men might kill me on account of Rebekah, because she is so beautiful. Now, we were told early in the book of Genesis how beautiful she was. You remember at the well. This is indeed a beautiful woman. And Isaac probably thought, you know what, I'm outnumbered here. I'm in a foreign land, and the Lord told you not to do that. I shouldn't even be here in the first place. And now it's very likely that they'll take her from me and probably kill me. Now, does that circumstance and his reaction sound similar to what we've looked at before? You see, this is exactly what Abraham did when faced in a similar situation. Like the expression "like father, like son" comes to mind. They both did the exact same thing in saying that their wives were their sisters, because they were afraid to say that they were their wives because they thought that would just lead to them killing him. Apparently these are gorgeous women, and both of their husbands, the father and now Isaac the son, are afraid of what's going to happen to them because of these circumstances. And Isaac lies here and says she's his sister, but she's not his sister at all, of course. Do you think Isaac knew what had previously happened to Abraham when he did the same thing? I personally think it's entirely possible he knew. And well, assuming that's if we assume that's the case, then why ever in the world would he do that? If you knew that your father, by acting in this way, potentially put his wife, your mother, in bed with another man by doing this thing, why ever would you do it? Well, I read someone who said, and I think you can bang away at this forever trying to get an answer, but someone summed this up a long time ago, very simply by saying, you know what? Sin is never logical. As someone else once also said, I read a while ago, a harbour of lies is never a port in a storm. So of course Isaac, he's trying to lie his way out of this circumstances of what he feels is dangerous situations, and he appears at a level to get away with it, well, at least for a little time. But friends, we're going to find out how that works out in the long run in the next episode. So I hope you can join with me as we journey together through this Book of Bible in the Bible Project Daily Podcast. Please remember, there's always a link not only to my Patreon page, but also to all the various places that you can access my teaching, as well as the episode notes will contain a transcript of what I said, which I know some people find very helpful. But anyway, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed our time together, and I'll see you back here tomorrow, I trust, on the Daily Bible Project Podcast. Bye-bye for now.